Did you have a good Easter? I was actually thinking, lots of people ask me, it's a question everyone asked you this last week, isn't it? How was your Easter? And I could honestly say to people that being together with our church community and celebrating the death and the resurrection of Easter was actually the high point of my Easter. It really was. I loved it. We organised, as we do each year, we organised our Easter, those 4 days around that, and we just loved being here and just celebrating that with you guys. And then on Monday, I rode my bike up to Stirling. I took the long route and rode up to Stirling. And Roz and Megan drove up, and we met at Red Cacao, which, if you don't know, is the best chocolate cafe in the world. And we got a hot chocolate. I always get their Aztec, which is like a spicy chili hot chocolate. It is the best hot chocolate in the world. And then we went into a little park in Stirling and rolled out a rug and just sat there and talked and ate chocolate and read books. And that's my idea of like a really relaxing day. That's what we wanted to do on Monday, was just to relax. And that's my idea of like rest. That's like perfect rest to me. But everyone's got a different idea of rest. So I wonder, what does rest look like to you? What does like kind of a perfect day of rest look like to you? Rest looks different to different people. For some people it's hot chocolate and a good book. For other people it's watching TV or just sort of being at home. That's their idea of rest, not having to go anywhere. Some people will talk about time with family and friends. People will talk about food and, the chance just to enjoy beautiful food, a long meal. That's my idea of rest. Some people will even talk about work or their job as rest. Have you ever heard anyone say something like, my family's so crazy that I go to work for rest? Yeah, you've heard people say things like that. Everyone has a different idea of rest. We all live in a world that has so much going on, don't we? Everyone is so busy. Everyone knows the answer to that question. Everyone is so busy. And many of us live feeling like life just doesn't stop. There's a kind of relentlessness, like life feels like it's coming at us all the time, like there's no break. And if many of us were honest, we would say that we crave rest. Today we're beginning a new series that we're simply calling Rest, with so many people feeling like they are tired, like they are overworked and overwhelmed. We're asking ourselves, can our faith help? What does God have to say about the idea of rest? What can we learn from the life of Jesus and from the life of the early church? Can our faith help us find the kind of rest that so many of us feel like we so desperately need? Spoiler alert, the answer is going to be yes. In fact, a lot of people don't realise this, but rest is a major theme that runs through the Bible. I'm not kidding. Literally from the first pages of the Bible, the idea of rest is introduced, and the idea of rest sort of flows through and bubbles through all of the Old Testament and right through all of the New Testament. Jesus talked about rest too. Matthew 11:28, you might have heard this. Jesus says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." What we need to understand is that when Jesus says that, he's not offering you a day off work. When Jesus says, "Come to me and I'll give you rest," he's not promising you nights in front of the TV with nothing to do. He's not offering you a relaxed day in the park with friends or family. What Jesus is talking about is far more wonderful and far more powerful than that. But to get there, we're going to have to take a sort of a tour, a flyby tour through the Bible. It's going to be a roundabout tour. So I'm going to ask you to hang with me this morning, because I promise we're going to get somewhere good. But for now, let's begin. We're going to strap ourselves in and go back to where it all started, way back into the Garden of Eden, the very first part of the story of the Bible. And if you know anything about the story of the Bible, you'll know that the story of the Bible begins with a creation story. That God creates the world in 7 days. And some of you might have read that story. You might have heard a little about that story, that for 6 days God creates the stars and the moons, days and seasons, plants and animals, birds and fish. He creates humankind. And can you remember what God did on the seventh day, the last day? I'll read it to you. This is Genesis chapter 2, verse 2. It's literally the second chapter, the beginning of the second chapter in your whole Bible. It says, by the seventh day, God had finished the work that he'd been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and he made it holy because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. Now there's a really important detail in that that's really easy to miss. And I missed this for a lot of years. Until someone pointed out to me, did you notice that there's no end to the seventh day? Now, if you go back and you read Genesis chapter 1, all of the other 6 days end the same way, literally the same way. They all say this. They say, there was evening. God does something during the day, and then it says there was evening and there was morning, marking the end of the day and the beginning of a new day. But there's no end to the seventh day. And most Bible scholars believe that this is a way of the writers trying to communicate to you that the intention was that the seventh day rest would continue forever. There was no end to the day where people rested with God. The seventh day rest was supposed to go on forever, but forever doesn't last very long, because if you turn the pages in your Bible, you turn to Genesis chapter 3 and read about people rebelling against God and rebelling against the kind of life that he set up for them. Humankind decide that they want to do life on their own. They don't like the kind of the way that God wants for them to do things, and they've got better ideas. They want to be their own boss, and so they rebel against God. I want you to listen to the result of their rebellion, the result of their decision. There's several results, but I want you to listen to this one. This is from Genesis chapter 3, verse 17. And to Adam, God said, "Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the dust." That's Bible language of saying until you die. "Since from it," that's the dust, "since from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return." Verse 19 says, "By the sweat of your brow you will eat food until you return to the ground." God's painting a picture saying the result of your sin will be, the words he uses in the NIV are painful toil and hard work. The result of sin is that work becomes hard for humankind. You're going to have to work hard, and you're going to have to work hard to make a living until you die. That sounds like life for many of us, doesn't it? You work hard, and then you die. But do you notice that the result of sin is a kind of relentless life without rest? The picture of rest that you just read in Genesis chapter 2 is gone, and it's been replaced by this idea of toil and sweat and difficult, hard work. Stick with me, this is going somewhere, I promise. Fast forward a few thousand years, and humanity's gone from bad to worse. Violence and death and hate and greed and war have become normal across the planet. And God reaches out to people. He reaches out to people through a guy called Moses. You ever heard of his name, Moses? God reaches out to people through a guy called Moses. And through Moses, God makes a deal with people. In Bible language, we call this a covenant. It's sort of a deal between God and between people. And the covenant is based, the covenant that God made with people through Moses is based around a whole set of rules and laws. The most famous of those laws we call the 10 Commandments. You've heard it, right. Can you remember any of them? No, it's not a test. But there are 10 commandments. Some of them you've heard of, things like don't murder and don't steal. The most important one, my children should be paying attention, honour your father and mother. It's in the Big 10. It's in the Big 10. And then there's this one in Exodus chapter 20, verse 8. remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labour and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or your daughter, nor your male or female servants, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that's in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the seventh day and made it holy. God sets apart one day of the week, they called the day the Sabbath. It's a day of rest to help remind people of that holy day, that holy space that God set up back in Genesis chapter 2. Now, if you're anything like me, I grew up thinking that this commandment, I grew up thinking that the Sabbath was a rule that said you couldn't do any work on Sunday. If you were really religious, you didn't even play sport on Sunday. And even today, there are some people that think that the Sabbath is about taking time out. It's about don't work, it's about relax, it's about spend time with family, it's about have a long lunch, it's about read a good book. Now, taking a day out a week to do that is a good idea. But that's not what God had in mind when he introduced the idea of Sabbath to people. The Sabbath that God's talking about links back to that Genesis story. It links back to Genesis chapter 2. Sabbath is supposed to be a weekly reminder of what life with God should be like. Sabbath isn't about rest as in not doing any work. Sabbath is about rest as in I'm content. It's about rest as in I'm in a good place, I'm at peace, I can breathe. Now God says in here, he says don't do any work, but remember these were people who farmed to make a living. So when God says don't do any work, he's not talking about take a day off and kind of holiday. What he's saying is trust me to provide for you. Take a day where you don't work hard to provide for yourself, where you say, you know what, God's got this. That's what Sabbath's about. It's about people making space to rest in who God is. It's about people sort of taking their hands off the steering wheel and say, I can trust God. Just for a day a week initially, I can trust God. He's got this. Sabbath was a weekly reminder that God is in control. That there will come a day when God will come to set everything right. There will come a day where humans will be free from the cycle of toil and sweat and work and die. There will come a day where people will be able to live in this rest of God, in this holy rest of God forever, back the way that it was in Genesis chapter 2. Sabbath was a little taste of what was to come, when God would send someone to defeat sin and to make the world right again. Fast forward another 1,500 years, and a poor rabbi from a little country town that you've never heard of stands up and says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Can you see it? This is so cool. Jesus isn't saying, come to me because I've got 5 tips to help you relieve stress in your life. This is Jesus saying, I'm the one. This is Jesus saying, I'm the one that's come to restore the seventh day rest. I'm the one that's come to restore the kind of living with God that you were designed to live in the very first place. I've come to put an end to work hard and die. I've come to give you back a life of peace and contentment and rest in the presence of God. This is Jesus saying, if you're sick of trying and struggling, if you're sick of a life that looks like work hard and die, come to me and I will give you rest. Come to me and find peace. Come to me and find freedom. Come to me and find contentment. Come to me and find life the way it was supposed to be. That's what Jesus is saying. This is so much better than a day off, right? We're created to live in relationship with God. We're created to trust Him. We're created to lean on Him. We're created to let Him satisfy us, to let Him provide for us. But sin broke that relationship, right? Sin forced people to work hard, to struggle to get through life. Sin forced people to sweat and to toil to get by in life. Sin forced people to struggle to try and do life on their own. If I just work a bit harder, if I just try a bit harder, life will work out, right? Sin forced people to live like this, to live in this sort of perpetual cycle, this kind of merry-go-round of busyness that you can't get off. Forced people to live like that forever until they die. And Jesus comes to make a way for people to get off that merry-go-round and to re-enter this life of rest with God. Where you don't have to try and you don't have to sweat and you don't have to toil through life, to come back into a kind of life where God will provide for you, where God will be enough for you, to come back into a kind of life where you can find peace and contentment and rest in Him. This is Jesus saying, do you feel overwhelmed in life? Do you feel just beat down by the busyness, by the things that are coming at you? Do you feel stressed? Do you feel anxious? Do you feel like it's just all too much? And Jesus comes to offer you rest in that place. A real, lasting rest, a kind of peace and contentment that you'll never find by trying hard to do things on your own. This is the best kind of rest that you could ever ask for. Because walks on the beach, they become a memory, don't they? Holidays fade away in our minds. A good book always has an ending. Time with family and friends, it doesn't last forever, does it? But that's not what the Sabbath rest of the Bible is about. That's not what Jesus comes to offer us. Jesus comes to take away our need to toil and to sweat and to work hard. And Jesus says, I've done the hard work for you. That's what the cross is, right? Is Jesus saying, I'm going to pay the price. I'm going to do the hard work for you to be free from sin. I'm going to do the hard work for you to be free from the need to try and to struggle. And because of what I've done on the cross, Jesus says, you can be reconnected to God in a beautiful relationship of rest and peace and ultimate contentment. I've done everything that needs to be done, says Jesus. And now, and this is the best part for some of us, no matter what's happening in your life, no matter how stressful things are at work, no matter how difficult things are at home, no matter how hard your finances are, no matter what comes your way, you can find rest in the middle of those things, right? Because you can find Jesus in the middle of those things. He's got you. He will provide for you. He will satisfy you. You can know that your future in the middle of those things where you're thinking to yourself, how am I going to get out of this? How's this thing going to end? That you have someone you can trust in that's bigger than you. That's the good news of Sabbath rest, right? You don't have to try to change your circumstances to hope that you'll find rest at the end of the problem that the problem that you're facing. It's Jesus coming and saying, you can find rest in the middle of the problem that you're facing because I am there. That's good news, right? God's Sabbath rest is an invitation for people to live a different kind of life. One that isn't all about your efforts and your hard work. Instead, it's about Jesus saying, come to me and experience my kind of rest. Trust me. Trust what I've done to set you free. Rest in me and the life that I have prepared for you. Is Jesus saying, do you want that kind of life? Are you ready for that kind of life? Are you ready to enter that kind of life? So back to the question that we started with, can our faith help us find the sort of rest that we so desperately need? The answer is a massive yes. Jesus offers us rest. But it's even better than the kind of rest that you thought you wanted. It's even better than a day off or a holiday. Jesus invites you into a kind of Sabbath rest that's not about time off work. It's not about chilling in front of the TV. It's not about, a perfect day with family. It's way better than that. It's an invitation to a life with God, an invitation of trusting Him, of leaning on Him, of finding contentment in Him, of resting in Him and what He's done for us, regardless of the circumstances that are happening in life around us. And all you need to do to have access to that kind of rest is to say yes to the invitation that Jesus makes to every single person on the planet. No matter how old you are or young you are, no matter how wealthy you are or poor you are or smart you are or anything you are. Jesus makes an invitation for you to enter this rest with Him. All you need to do is to say yes to the invitation that He's given you. For most of us, that begins with an apology. The word the Bible uses is repentance. There's an apology where we say, God, I'm sorry for trying to do life on my own. I'm sorry for trying to control things, for trying to be my own boss. God, forgive my sin. Give me a new life of rest in you. That's the first step, and then comes what for most of us is the really hard part. To set aside your own efforts and to really trust Him. I'm talking on the daily now, not just sort of an in the mind, actually day to day, the decisions that we make. To take your hands off the wheel and to trust that Jesus has got this. To trust that if I don't try so hard and work so hard, if I just rest in Him. And I'm not saying rest as in you don't do anything. But if I just rest in Him, He's got control of my life and He will take my life in the best direction possible. And that's not easy for most of us to do, right? But it is possible. That's what God's Sabbath rest is really all about.